Getting connected. Oh, there you
Hi,
are.
Sass. Sorry
Hey.
about that.
Oh no, you're good. I just started streaming just now, so we're already live.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Felix Sargent. I'm the chair of the board for the Center for Election Science. I'm a little late. I was just putting my 1-year-old down.
Oh no, you're
Sorry.
totally fine. No, I mean nobody. No, we don't have any viewers yet. Like I literally just. You're totally fine.
Ah, it's fine.
Um,
That was for the recording.
there we go. I love it. I love it. No, so glad to have you. Thanks for coming on. Yeah. So as we are getting connected and getting some viewers on, um, here maybe we should try to. Maybe I'll grab the YouTube link and throw it in the Center for Election Science Discord. Maybe we get a few more people to join on. So let me go hunt that down. They don't generate until the stream starts, so we'll grab that. But yeah, just real quick, we'll do another proper introduction in a second. But I'd just love to know like how you're doing, how you're feeling, what's going on. Just like today, you just having a good day so far?
It's been an intense day. So I've been out in New Jersey. My mother-in-law recently passed, which is obviously never a good situation, but it's she's in a better place compared to how she was before. And so that's just been a lot of kind of family stuff that's been going on. But at the same time, yeah, no, I think things are going well. We're in a good place. We've got some nice music playing on in the background, and the baby's down and nicely asleep. So I think that's very good.
Sweet, I love it. I love it. Well, we got a couple people
Oh, can you
connected.
hear
Like I
me?
said, yeah, I can hear you. Can you
Great.
not hear me?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, you just kind of
Okay.
paused for a second there.
Things are lagging a little bit here, but that's all right. I'm gonna get this sorted out. My computer is not the best for streaming, so there is a
Yeah,
little bit of lag, but that's okay. Like I said, I just want to share this link in the Center for Election Science Discord real quick, um, and then hopefully close out some things uh, here. And then we'll start diving right in as people are coming on.
great. How are you doing? I'm so happy that you're not only running for Congress, but you're a huge participant in the Center for Election Science, or I mean the Discord at least. And I think that you being a part of the community has been really kind of invigorating for a lot of other people. Especially with your just like your your outward excitement about the topic. I think it's something that a lot of people feel internally, but aren't so good at expressing. And I feel like you really personify a lot of the movement in a lot of ways. That's very invigorating. So I want to say thank you so much for doing this and for just having this energy.
Yeah, and that's actually kind of what I want to talk about is exactly that, and why that's really important because the topic today, this is part one of two of inclusivity in voting reform, and so more specifically, Felix Sargent and I are involved in voting method reform and voting science, and so this is something. Part two next week, I'm going to have on Sarah Wolf, the executive director of the Equal Vote Coalition. So that's super exciting. So for anybody who's, but if you're looking at like, well, wait, but you're both white males, that's actually kind of the point, and that's kind of a
Right.
thing that I want to highlight a little bit here is that for so long, voting science has been mostly very white and very male. And this is why I actually really wanted to have Felix on today because both of us are actively pursuing, like addressing this problem in different ways. And I do think it's important for us to talk about that very explicitly because sometimes people only like to listen to people who look like them, and so once again, we'll introduce you. This is Felix Sargent on today. He is the chair of the board of directors for the Center for Election Science, which promotes voting method reform specifically for approval voting, which I engage with quite actively. But yeah, I'd love to just turn it over to you and just let you say your piece about how you feel about what's going on in this space and what you're doing to work with that.
Sure. I mean, first off, I'll go into my backstory of like how did I get involved in the Center for Election Science and just kind of in this field in general. In 2016, I think we were all shocked by the election of Donald Trump. More specifically, I was shocked by the fact that he won the Republican primary. The there were a ton of like reasonable candidates, but Donald Trump was the most polarizing candidate, and he won because of that polarization. Using the voting method that they were using for those primaries and caucuses, and I came across. I think it was on like Hacker News, like news.ycombinator.com. There was a link to Nikki Case's interactive guide to build a better ballot, and it just explained everything to me. And I couldn't help but think, well, if we know how to do this, why don't we do this? And I knew that Fair Vote was an organization, and I lived in San Francisco and Oakland. And I knew ranked choice voting, but once I found out about approval voting, I kept on thinking, like, I can't believe it doesn't feel like there's a science behind it. I looked at the Center for Election Sciences website, and it was terrible back then. You can judge it now, and feedback welcome. But it didn't look like the organization existed at all. But I was talking to friends, and literally on my wedding day, my wife's cousin comes to me and says, "Hey, by the way, I know you're into this voting science stuff. I know Aaron Hamlin, and I know he's looking for board directors. Would you be interested?" And my response to him was like, "Wait, they still exist?" So, and then kind of the story goes from there. And I've been involved for the last 5-6 years. I mean, since the day of my wedding. But when you think about all the things that had to happen there, all of those were privileged interactions. And, not only beyond just simply knowing that the results of the Republican primary, everything else from like just reading the right article about what's the systemic problem here, to me being a software engineer by trade, and thinking about like, okay, why do algorithms cause systemic problems, or why do we need to think systemically about things as opposed to just trying really hard, and the systems theory involved there, and then just simply having the luck of the network to just be introduced, which is one of the hardest barriers that I think we're going to have to overcome in order to have both the Center for Election Science be more diverse and for the voting reform movement to be more diverse. I've talked for a lot. I'll let you get in another question, but I know we're going to be going around the subject.
Yeah, no, and I mean like that's actually a really good point, that like the kind of the privilege of it, of like it very much also was like a lot of voting science has had a lot of software engineers, a lot of like very like mathematics or like STEM field people, which just historically has not been very diverse for a variety of systemic issues. We're talking about systemic problems right now, right? And so it is kind of voting science, I think, became kind of a natural extension of that. But the thing is, like, that's voting science, and then when we get into like voting reform, like actual on the ground real reform, like we're talking about something that literally affects everybody.
Yeah.
And so like, if this is something that is like core and foundational to like how the country operates and how representation is handled in our government, like it is incredibly important that the reform movement itself reflects the diversity of the entire nation. And the United States is incredibly diverse. And so I want to actually just give you the opportunity right now. Like, what is like the thing that you and the Center for Election Science is like specifically doing very recently to address this issue?
So, I mean, there are like, when you say this issue, do you mean diversity in just the environment or within CES specifically?
Well, so let's just say CS specifically for
Okay.
now. We can stay focused on that.
I mean,
But yeah.
first and foremost, we are looking for more people to join our board of directors. Right now, our board of directors is around 6 people, and it's literally all white men. Not just white men, but coastal white men, and that it frustrates the heck out of me. We um, we recently had 2 women on the board who chose to leave, and they chose to leave more for like internal kind of like I don't know how much I want to like play the inside baseball here, but like they they kind of necessarily didn't feel aligned with the leadership of the Center for Election Science. They believed in the mission and they believed that the staff could do it, but in a lot of ways they felt that like they wanted to focus on other things that were happening in their lives. Not that they thought that like I'm resigning because this specific thing had happened, and I'm very, if anyone's like that smells fishy, very happy to introduce you to either of those board members. Um, but it sucks that now we have no women on the board, and it's like we knew we weren't doing well from the beginning, and now it's worse. And so that's one of the reasons that I've been talking to you and trying to talk to everyone that I can about get involved in the Center for Election Science. Join, talk to your friends, help build diversity for the Center for Election Science. But ultimately, we're querying our network, and our network is already by default, largely white, male, and nerdy, and coastal. So we have our work ahead of us, but I think I don't know. I don't know whether we want to say like skip over the why it's necessary part, but ultimately this is an election reform that will be benefiting literally everyone in the United States who's underneath it. I want to make sure we don't mess this up. I want to make sure that Center for Election Science doesn't get painted with the same kind of rod or brush that Fair Vote does, for example. So Fair Vote is very much considered a liberal, and ranked choice voting is considered a liberal reform. Our first win was out in Fargo, North Dakota, and definitely a white city, but a Midwestern city. A more democratic city, but a very Republican state. And a great place to try things. The second place we won was St. Louis, which is majority black, but had historically not had black mayors, largely because of disenfranchisement and vote splitting. And with the election of Tashara Jones in 2021, we changed that, and that largely happened because of the reform of approval voting and because of the open primaries that happened within that reform. We believe that the one of the hard things that's been hardest to describe to people is, why does voting science matter? Like, I think everyone understands that the spoiler effect is bad, but why is it a good thing that the right person wins? And how can you say that without being in air quotes, the right person winning? Sometimes people talk about, oh, we get to fix elections. I mean, like, it's
Elections are fixed because we have choose one voting. That's what gerrymandering is. It's literally leveraging the broken system to rig elections. That is harder to do if you have approval voting.
Exactly. But like, even the language we use around repairing our broken systems is difficult. But like, what does democracy look like when democracy is representative? And so many nations around the world use choose one voting. It's difficult for us, and especially as Americans, to fathom what a functioning democracy looks like and what benefits it derives to its citizens when it is well functioning. And but I mean, unfortunately, you don't have to go very far to look throughout history and find situations where minorities organized to get political power, and then because of the rules built into the system, even though they were in control of that system, lost it. And a lot of that was violent, and a lot of that was um, um, done with malice, absolutely. But it's also important that we look into the role of the the institutions themselves and the rules that create those institutions and fix the problem systemically. And I believe approval voting is one of the core pieces in order to be able to solve that.
Right. And this core question of like, why does it matter? Like, it's very hard to answer. And
Yeah.
like, that's been become my focus. For so long, we have said voting science is unintuitive. I've said that as recently as like a month ago. And I very recently created this TikTok series going through a ranked choice voting election. I've been getting very good responses from it. I've written scripts for follow-ups with approval voting and star voting. I intend to film the approval voting one tonight. It'll probably be released this weekend. And what I've learned through that process is that it is only unintuitive because nobody has who really understands it has put in the effort to make it intuitive, to make it accessible. I've even found that I recently did a workshop with the Center for Election Science on building a campaign and organizing. And one of the things that we had in there was like putting together our pitch. And I've been working on my pitch for approval voting for a while. And I really feel like through that process over almost a year now, I have really finally gotten the language to a point where it makes sense. And I'm now in a space where I feel the problem is accessibility, and that's something I want to tackle. I believe that we can get all the quote unquote right people, the diverse group of people that we need if we make the content accessible. And that's not just skin color, that's age as well. Like we saw in New York City very recently. I think it was, the article was behind paywall, so I wasn't able to look too deep into it, but that a lot of elderly folks felt very disenfranchised by ranked choice voting because it was too complex, and it wasn't described very well, and like the education on it was very poor. And so like, this is another reason we were like approval voting, because it's just so simple. But I really feel now that like, you know what, this can be made to make sense, but we just need to put in the effort to do it. And so this is a huge part of like, I kind of want to just read just a little bit off of my website now. You just go to voteforsass.com and you go to the voting method reform part of my platform. I think that I'm able to make this pretty simple. The way people in power are chosen is the most consequential mechanic of how a nation operates. That's the first sentence. And I think that like alone just makes, I don't know, what do you think, Felix? Does that make sense, like intuitive sense?
No,
No. Okay.
that's
Interesting.
like a ton of $5 words right there. Um, you know, uh, I mean, I would take a lot of words from like get out the vote campaigns, or even with Fargo, they say it's a thumbs up or thumbs down on every candidate. And I love the simplicity there. The question of like I think people know why voting matters.
Mm.
I almost don't think people like. The question is, at what time are you, when you're interfacing with someone, when you're beginning that conversation, what conversation are you having? Are you having the can I get your signature? Are you having the can I get you to donate?
Right.
Or
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
you're going to go vote. This is how this is how your vote will be counted. Or are you, here are the results. Here's how your vote ended up affecting the election.
This is at the why should you care about voting method reform? That's
Right.
the stage I'm at with
Well,
this.
but then again, what's your call to action? What do you actually like?
Well, yeah,
What do you
and,
want people to do?
I'm like setting it up. is what I'm trying to do, but I see what you're saying. So then the next thing I say is, like, as you said, currently in the US and many other democratic countries, we primarily choose government officials through a process called choose one voting, where every citizen gets to make one mark per race on their ballot to show support for a single person to represent them in government. This voting method is one of the worst voting methods ever created. Choose one voting mechanically polarizes people, feeding this toxic idea that we can only advocate for one group or one set of ideas at a time. This contributes to the dreaded spoiler effect you may have heard of, where similar voters split their votes between two similar candidates, potentially causing both of them to lose to a third candidate who may be disliked by all those similar voters. Fear of this mechanical problem that's baked into choose one voting leads to the strategic lesser evil voting we find ourselves constantly hearing about, and an inevitable, unavoidable trend toward this two-party system we found ourselves stuck in. It's the math of the method, not a vice of the voters or a crime of the candidates. Fortunately, there are dozens of different voting methods to choose from. One of the blessings of modern voting science is the whittling down to two primary recommendations for voting reform right now in the US: star voting and approval voting. And then when I get to approval voting, I say approval voting is comically simple. It's nothing more than changing the instructions on the ballot from choose one to choose one or more. And then I talk some more about it. But at the end, I say, hang on. Did it move? I moved it around. Or no, I think I moved it all the way to the end. Oh, I don't even know what's where on my website anymore. Well, anyway, yeah, somewhere in there, I say, like, ultimately, it just comes down to the power of your vote. And so your vote is limited by choose one voting in that exact way, that you can only choose one. So approval voting unlocks the power of your vote to increase the accountability for our representatives and the people who run everything. So that's kind of like the start and end of like how I get into it, to try to again explain like why this matters, and like this fundamental connection between like the choose one causes like this tribalism, and approval voting is like about working together kind of thing.
I think I think what you wrote is brilliant, and you know, something that very much makes sense for your website. I think the harder thing is that, like, there are so many different ways that we, the Center for Election Science, need to engage with people, and so many different stages that people go through on their progression. And honestly, 90% of people shouldn't have to care about this, right? This should just work, right? It is a fluke of history that we only get one vote. There are so many prior electoral systems where you know, you simply got to review each candidate independently. They just kind of faded to the backwards history of time. I mean, in ancient Greece, they used to vote by putting pebbles into jars which had the names of the candidates on them. But obviously, you know, people couldn't just, you know, throw as many pebbles as they wanted in each jar. So, you know, they had to restrict, and they say, okay, you know, everyone only gets one pebble, just so that people wouldn't put two pebbles in the same jar. And that kind of fluke extended out from history. But, you know, the idea is people don't worry about this at the end of the day. You know, and they don't need to know how or why it works. They just need to be able to, you know, sign to get it on the ballot, and then vote yes when it comes to the ballot, and then enjoy using the system when it actually ends up happening. You know, it's only the people who we need to fundraise from, and to become advocates, to become leaders in their communities, who need to understand and to be able to explain, you know, why and how does this change things. And it's funny when you realize that these are different audiences.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, I guess, because that is not endorsing like a specific campaign that's happening with it, or like trying to raise a get a donation. So yeah, that's a really good point of like, depends on like where you're at in the chain, and that's a really good point. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And so again, I'm just thinking about like this accessibility thing though, of just like um, that's just text on a website, right? But
Mhm.
like, what I discovered with TikTok is like the discovery is just way better than just screaming into echo chambers on Twitter, which is
Yeah.
kind of what it feels like we're doing sometimes. And so I want to I want like, and plus it's like that's an up and coming generation, and that the generation that's in school right now, like they are so much more advanced in their knowledge about like that there are a lot of problems right now, like um that like the parents of those kids are talking about it, their older friends and family are talking about it, they have the social media and the access to information now, that like they are already primed as like, I'm already sick of the duopoly and I can't even vote yet, or whatever it, however you want to frame it. And so like that's why that's another reason that I think that like leveraging TikTok is going to be really powerful, and thinking about like, okay, using video, using vertical video, horizontal video, thinking about like but also like, yeah, having the door to door, the door knocks and the literature, and then going out and talking to people, making phone calls. People communicate in all sorts of different ways. They learn in all sorts of different ways. And like doing tablings and having demonstrations, and like working it into like other systems that people use or whatever, and or put in TV ads maybe someday, whatever it may be. Like, we reach people in different ways, and we have to be cognizant about like, okay, we need to be actively working to bring it to everybody. But you're very right, though, that we have to be smart about exactly what we're messaging to who, because what point in the chain are they, and that's a really good point that I guess I haven't thought that much about. So I kind of know what I get excited about and what I'm interested in, and I certainly think that my enthusiasm has rubbed off on some people, and it's given some others permission to be more enthusiastic about it, which I think is a good thing. And so like I think that is certainly a place that I see for myself. It's like, I want other people to see like it's okay to get really excited about this and see this as like, we can make a difference. We can do this. This is like, especially coming off the momentum of Fargo and St. Louis, of like, yeah, you can. Those are just random places in the U.S. Wherever you live, this is a thing you can work on.
I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna get a CD holder, and I'm gonna put my monitor on it. Sorry, that was like you had like a big rah rah, and I'm like, I'm gonna talk about a CD holder. There we go. That's nicer, isn't it? Hello. I don't. So you're not looking at my nose anymore. Like, one of the things that drives me crazy about this is that everyone's like, gosh. I mean, it was my brother-in-law's wedding like 2 weeks ago, and I had like an aunt come up to me and said, "Oh, I heard about what you did in New York City. Congratulations on for getting ranked choice voting." And I was like, "Oh, Sandy, I'm sorry. That actually wasn't us. And also, it was a complete mess." And she's like, "Oh, well, good. It was a complete mess. Yes, absolutely." Just like, well, okay, I don't know what side you're getting at it from, but like, the horrible thing about this is that ranked choice voting was, a subject of study by Jean-Charles de Borda in 1781. 1781, and like right now, I mean, I love what you're saying about like we can do it. The time is now. Let's go. And you think like, my God, ranked choice voting has had what, 300 years? 200 and a bit years in order for them to be able to get this working. And you know what? It doesn't effing work.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't work.
It's too complicated because people don't believe in it, because you can't explain it, because people don't have faith in it, when at the end of the day, you go like, and then what happened to my vote? And when you look at the ranked choice voting election that happened in New York City, and like great, ultimately when the ballots got counted, like they followed the process of ranked choice voting, but you look at the number of ballots that were exhausted, right? Which means that they're
143,000 or something like that. I mean,
a ridiculous percentage, like a third. I'm being very general here because I'm going off the top of my head, so correct me in the comments. But like roughly a third of the votes that were cast, or a third of the ballots that were cast, were exhausted at the end of the day,
It was about 15%.
in that election. Which, you think like, well, is that truly democratic? I mean, look, when it comes down to it, Adams was the Condorcet winner.
Hmm.
But I think I think it still suffers from the same kind of question of like, well, yeah, but like, how much approval does Adams have? How much endorsement does Adams have? Does Adams, have, what is, like, does he have the momentum
Does he
in
have the
order to
consensus
lead?
of the people?
The mandate to lead. Does he have
The
the mandate to
mandate.
lead? And ultimately, ranked choice voting provides an artificial 51%, but it also stops at 51. You can't get 52% of the vote with that. You can't have a landslide election in ranked choice voting unless you win all of the first place votes, which, okay, that could happen. But ultimately, one of the things I love about approval voting is that, when we ask ourselves, how do we know that approval voting was successful? When that person gets into office, that's the amount of approval that they have across across the board. Now we can go up or down from there, but we can keep measuring that approval through polling. And it means that the method by which we evaluate their success is the same method we use to judge whether they should have their jobs. And surely that is consistent. Like, surely that makes sense.
That's
The
great.
fact
I
that we
love
use
that.
approval
That's
voting
so
for
intuitive.
polling, right? Exactly. The fact that we use it for polling and we don't use it for elections makes no sense. So, what, but we were talking about, like, why is the moment now? And the moment is now because, literally, approval voting wasn't really seriously considered by political scientists. And in fact, approval voting didn't, well, so other than Stephen Brahms of NYU and some of his associates, out in like 1971, um, it 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 didn't really come from the political science establishment. People may have heard of Arrow's theorem and Kenneth Arrow, who worked for the Rand Corporation, a big government think tank. These were people who were using their mathematics skills in order to, calculate the game theory about how the Cold War is going to end and who should fire nukes when, right? Like, really grim stuff. But then Kenneth Arrow applied that kind of same theory to voting theory, and came up with his Arrow's incompleteness theorem, which says that ranked choice voting sucks. Which, well, okay, news at 11. But um, one of the things that kind of evolved from that was this, like, hang on a second, let's apply game theory to the science of voting. And then we thought, like, well, hang on a second, why are we doing this so complicated? Why don't we just let people give scores or ratings to each candidate? This could be a lot simpler. And the reason why now is the time for this reform is because literally no one's done this before. We've tried ranked choice voting, it's failed. Approval voting, now that we've won in Fargo and then we've doubled down on that win in St. Louis, we're on a roll. And now the question that's in front of the Center for Election Science as an organization, we have three problems. One is, we kind of have too many campaigns, or too many campaigns we could do. That's a great problem to have, and I'm really, really happy for it. The work that Chris, our director of campaigns, Chris Raleigh, is doing, in order to be able to get people involved, organized, excited, and advocating for their local city councils, is incredible. But now we have a lot to manage, and we need to staff up in order to be able to make sure that those campaigns are coordinated and have the resources they need to run properly. The second is fundraising, which of course is related. We want to fund as many campaigns as we possibly can, but if we can't run that many campaigns, thanks, we can't run that many campaigns if we don't have the funds to go do it. And so, the hard thing for this organization is, we our ambitions are limited only by the funds that we receive and the donations we receive. And this isn't necessarily like a call for individual giving, which is very important. But ultimately, we need grants from organizations. And we need grants for organizations that are involved in, like, the amount of money that goes to anti-gerrymandering projects, that goes to get out the vote efforts, all of it is absolutely astonishingly large. And when you consider the power of the reform and then how cheaply the reform of approval voting can get enacted, or how cheaply it was enacted in Fargo or in North Dakota, like I think we gave something like $150,000 in order to actually run those campaigns. Like I'm sure I'm going to get that wrong, but like under $500,000 in order to be able to run a successful campaign. Like that's nothing in this
It's
world.
nothing in this political world for sure. I'm running my congressional campaign right now, and thinking about budgets and stuff, and like, and I was involved in like writing up the first draft budget for a potential campaign in Austin, and it's like, man, this is cheap. The amount of impact you can have, like this is the argument that I make. So like sometimes I get into like these really nitty gritty like sciencey debates with people about voting
Yeah,
methods,
yeah,
and then they point out like this like thing about approval voting that's like makes it not perfect, and I'm like, yeah, no voting method is perfect. That's not what approval voting is about. Approval voting is about the fact that you can implement it for $0 at the cost of the taxpayer. Like that's what it's about. We live in the real
like
world
literally,
here.
you go from radio buttons to check boxes, right? Like,
That's it.
um,
That's the whole thing.
and it is infuriatingly simple. And like, I have no problem with star voting. I actually really think that star voting is fantastic. I think it solves the wrong problem. And I think it's incredibly expensive to be able to implement. I mean, literally, it has not been properly accounted for because they haven't won any of their campaigns yet. And I hope they do. I hope they win their campaigns. I want them to be as successful as possible. Sarah, I hope you're watching. Um, you know, Center for Election Science and Equal Vote have kind of had this like on again, off again relationship. Um, and I know that in the general community of voting science in general, people are like, well, Center for Election Science isn't really like election science, it's just approval voting. And I think that, like, to address that concern, like, yeah, but I hope you can understand our reasoning there. When you look at, like, ultimately it costs dollars, and it costs dollars in order to be able to write the code and get the code verified for tabulation. Whereas literally, if it's just +1 on approval voting, it makes it a lot simpler. I missed the third thing that I wanted to say, right? The three things that are a big concern for the Center for Election Science right now, and that is diversity. And like, I know that we kind of started out with that, but like, we, in order for our campaigns to succeed, we need to be involved in communities. And I want to see approval voting in Native American territories, right? I think that would be absolutely incredible. I would like to see approval voting used by the NAACP, excuse me, for their for their internal elections, for their board elections. I would like to see it used in every city across America, every municipal waste district. And I would also love to see proportional representation. I mean, we can kind of get into that as well if we're going to be making a council. And we're going to be talking about diversity. Proportional representation is going to be hugely, hugely important. But if it's a question of like a single seat election, we should use approval voting.
Yeah, I do real quickly want to push back on star voting a little bit and just say that the advantage that star voting has is that it can do what ranked choice voting has been doing, which is eliminate an election.
Eliminate an election?
Yeah, so this is how ranked choice voting actually like achieves any kind of success, even though it's like 44%.
Oh.
Is that a lot of states have majority clauses, and so they're able to go from 2 elections down to 1 because they have a quote unquote majority. It's not a real majority, but the majority clauses are poorly written or whatever, so they're able to get around it. And that's an advantage that star voting has over approval voting, is that in those jurisdictions where economic viability is king, and it has that legal viability to eliminate an election, I think that star voting may be more viable than approval voting. Of course, they need to actually get it implemented in a city at some point, which hopefully I think will happen soon in Eugene. But I very much advocate for both because I think that you're gonna, when you start looking at economic viability and legal viability, that approval and star flip flop a little bit depending on where you are in the country.
I mean,
I think approval probably is more often going to be the one than star, but I don't think that we can do it with approval alone.
I mean, this is your show. You tell me, but like, I have a rebuttal to that. If that's
Okay,
not really
I
the
want to hear it. I want to
okay,
hear it because you have some good rebuttals that other people don't bring me.
okay. So, we asked this question when we were working with Benjamin Singer for Prop D for Democracy before. I mean, from Show Me Integrity, the organization that ran in St. Louis. And we did polling around, how should we structure Prop D? Should this be something where we want to, we eliminate the primary and we come up with you know, a, a way to amend approval voting in order to be able to make it do that kind of runoff, or what do people actually want? And we just kind of asked the question arbitrarily as opposed to like having a method that would actually fix that. Um, and ultimately, people wanted to keep the general election, and they had an open primary and a general election, which meant that there was there was no, like, the general election was just the top two candidates versus each other. But I think a very interesting thing happened in St. Louis, which is that meant that the top two candidates from the approval voting election went head to head on each against each other, and they had to diversify. They had to dig deep into their own positions, which were very similar, about why they were different from each other. And I think you had a massive elevation of the conversation because now they had that couple of month period where Tashara Jones needed to say how she was different from Cara Spencer, and Cara Spencer needed to do the same. And there were some really fascinating conversations about the racial relationship that government has to the citizens of St. Louis. Tashara Jones is Black, Cara Spencer is white. Both are single mothers, women. Like, they cover some of the same demographics, and then they cover different parts of demographics. But they had to dig into nuance in a way that we never see in American politics, and it was fascinating. And there was a little bit of um, back and forth, but they realized that aggressiveness wasn't always playing to their strengths, because it was very clear that they could alienate some of their own audience by being aggressive towards the other. Um, and then ultimately, I think that I think one of the hardest things about democracy is discovery, right? When there are 35 candidates running for an election, how do you find out anything about all of them? And, especially as an individual, how do you get involved? When it narrows to two, now you can really make up your mind, and especially if they're similar to each other. One of the things that my wife and I will talk about is it's very hard to choose between a Mars bar and a Snickers bar, or sometimes a Mars bar and a Mars bar, right? Where they're both relatively the same thing, but you can only choose one. Which one do you want? And sometimes the difference is arbitrary, and it will be for most people. But for some, it can be like, no, that single policy difference, that's where I draw the line. I would love to see if there's a scenario where a a candidate would have won the approval voting election, but they would lose the top two runoff, because I think that means that something was discovered, someone flubbed a line, said something rude, that caused them to lose it. I think that's very important. Um, and so, if having an automatic runoff is not immediately a good thing. And also, I think when you're comparing costs, if like that's really the only thing you're going for, the cost of people like the education campaign, the programming required for both making sure the ballot machines tabulate correctly and also for assistive voting devices to function properly, and then I think that'll far overcome the benefits of not doing a second election.
Yeah, so I will say that's actually really interesting. I like what you were highlighting there. There's no part of I'm not someone who says that I'd rather just have a single approval voting election and no runoff. That is
Yeah,
actually
of course.
that's not what I think.
Me
The
too.
runoff, I believe, enhances approval voting. And you've highlighted a new way that I didn't really realize before that it also enhances it. But I mean, just from a scientific perspective, like it's even more accurate. It helps to address some of these kind of weird corner cases that people bring up. The issue that some people draw is like a turnout bias. Between the primary and the general.
Yeah.
And so like that is one of the big reasons that people want
I mean,
some people do want to get rid of a primary.
that'll change once people realize which election matters, right?
That's a good point, and that's fair. Like I think you make some good points about how like actually like having the two separate elections may be better. But still, at the end of the day, when we just look at like, in order to get the reform passed, that the economic argument sells very well with legislators to say we can reduce how many or taxpayer dollars you are spending every year. Like that is a way in that fair vote has been successful with.
Well,
Implementing
not
ranked
really. I
choice
mean, the
voting. Well,
majority
that's true.
of
That's true.
like fair vote would be much more successful if they had. I don't know. I don't know why they don't have like a. I mean, or like I don't know why Fair Vote doesn't say like, okay, here are the voting machines. We're just going to give them to you, or like, they work with
Yeah.
Dominion or someone and just say like, hey, Dominion, RX 207s are Fair Vote approved, right? Ways that they can just say like, hey, that you can switch to ranked choice elections, immediately. No idea why that isn't the case, but like, you know, complexity kills, and
Yeah. Oh, I
that's the
agree.
reason that Fair Vote doesn't
Yeah, I
work.
mean, they fail more than half the time, but I'm just saying like that is at least what has given them the in. And implementing star voting is much less complex than implementing ranked choice voting. It's more compatible with existing electoral infrastructure, and having that economic edge to the argument, I think may give star voting an edge in some jurisdictions,
Versus
depending on
ARV, but yeah, yeah,
well, I'm saying even versus approval in some jurisdictions, if Star gets some real momentum, I think that that may in some jurisdictions where you do have that majority clause, where they do want to get rid of an election, or depending if you're going straight to the legislators, Star voting may end up giving them that edge. Like I said, I'm for either one, whichever one can get
yeah.
passed in that jurisdiction.
Agreed. I hope they succeed, but I mean, the thing is, we're very rarely, if ever, doing an apples to apples, right? The question is,
Yeah,
where's their
that's true.
campaign, right? And
Right.
so, I think it's unfortunate that like, I mean, we're not really competing for the same dollars,
Mhm.
which is good. Sorry, like not to say I think it's unfortunate, but like we're not competing for the same dollars.
Yeah.
Star voting is a very local campaign right now. The One of the things that just kind of breaks my heart is this for people who are kind of coming into election science theory, and a lot of people who like want to get into advocacy. They now are presented with this absolute buffet of options to be able to support, and they go like, oh man, I don't care about the math, and then they leave. And I would love to see the community in general rally behind approval voting, because we've proven it works. We have a organization that is at scale and operating at scale, and growing faster and faster to be able to put these campaigns on the ground. And Star is a theoretical reform that doesn't have really theoretical benefits that can't be easily addressed by other concerns there. Like, I like Star. I agree. It's elegant. It makes sense. It highlights individual expressivity, but I think that expressivity ultimately does not change who gets elected in 99.99% of elections. So
And yeah, and that is an argument I've heard you make before that like once you scale approval voting, you have the data that you need, and
yeah,
you're not going to just get more by having a more expressive ballot. And I think that's fair too. Okay, so I don't know what your time is like. I don't mind keep going, but I know that I'd only scheduled an hour out of your day. Um, so where are you at right now with time?
let's go a little bit over.
Okay.
But I think that one of the things that I really wanted to talk about more was diversity. I think
Yeah,
one of
I
the
wanted to
things
get back to that
that's
too.
unfortunate about this is like I want to talk about diversity, but I kind of can't. Like, I'm an immigrant. I moved to the United States when I was 13 years old. I moved from the UK. I I learned about American cultural relations, which is kind of AKA racism. Eh, but like I explicitly learned about it, which was a very weird
Hmm.
um, experience. And
Just like in
yeah,
school.
no, like just like the way that I would interact with, like, London is a really diverse place, and you can't judge. It's a lot harder to judge someone's class and social status by the color of their skin. Um, it's a lot easier to do it in the United States for right or wrong.
Interesting.
Um, and so like and as a child you have stupid questions, but you're kind of like, what why is why are things the way they are is a lot more is a very different question when you're an immigrant, because you have kind of a different kind of like comparison. Things can be different, but that like people treat people differently based on the color of their skin, and that's weird to you. um and that I don't know where I'm really going here, and like it's always such dangerous territory. But like one of the things that I can't emphasize enough is the need for us to both diversify our board, and then for us to also diversify our message. I think one of the reasons I kind of like jumped on so much when I was saying to you, like, well, who are you talking to? Where are they in the pipeline? What do they need to know about the voting reform movement in order for them to be able to get involved? And how do you condense your message to just simply that point? I think one of the biggest things you're going to see for the Center for Election Science in 2022, excuse me, um, is public relations. That's we just hired our director of research, who is doing incredible work, doing polling and data modeling, but that also is giving us the resources we need in order to be able to go out there and say, this is how people feel about approval voting. This is how people feel about their elections. This is how people feel about their, the elections that happened in this town, or the city of Fremont in the Bay Area. I think they had 12 candidates for mayor, 7, 12, something along those lines. And how is anyone going to be, a really representative winner when there's going to be that much vote splitting? And the fact that people don't know that there's a solution to that is really painful. But one of the things that's been hardest for me is that I'm in the communities I'm in, and I feel very awkward about the idea of like going into um communities that I don't it's not that I don't feel welcome in. It's more along the lines of like I don't want to walk in and be a carpetbagger, you
Mm.
know, and be like, "Hi everyone, I'm going to ignore everything about what you're doing and just go say and talk about approval voting." Right? I want to be able to bring approval voting to my communities, but I also need to be able to make sure that that message is diverse. And so that's one of the reasons I'm doing such a kick to reach out to everyone that we know and say like, "Hey, the closer you are to these communities that I don't necessarily have a network to, please help us get out the message. Please bring it up, or like introduce them to me. Help me diversify my communities, because I don't think it's right."
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, and so I'm so glad that you came on. We got to talk about this. Like I said, this has been a great conversation for me to have with you too, because it's opened my eyes about a few things as well that maybe I've missed or haven't considered. And again, thinking about like that accessibility piece of it, because like I said, I think for me it's like being able to like you said, condense the message and doing it in,
this is all wonky as hell,
yeah,
like who wants to get into the math of this?
right. And so like trying to bring it in this kind of like, you don't have to be some math whiz to understand this stuff or to care about it, or at least just to see the benefit at the end of
Yeah.
the day, just to see the benefit. And so
the hardest thing about all of this is encouraging people to dream, because I think for every time I talk about this, people are like, oh, so like Hillary would have won instead of Trump, and I'm like, no, a different candidate who you've literally never heard of, who you would love a lot more, but decided to never run simply because they knew they couldn't win, even though they felt like they had popular support. That person would win. How do you encourage people to dream like that?
Yeah, well, I think excitement is helpful in that. But yeah, no, that's a good point. I mean, like, and dreaming, and not even just dreaming about. I mean, and that's only for people who are like already politically engaged about like, dreaming about like a better representative. Like, not everybody's into that.
Yeah.
And so
Well,
like,
I don't
I
know.
think
I hope so.
well, I mean, a lot of people are disconnected. I mean, when we look, look at
Yeah.
the turnout,
I hear
right?
you.
And so, like, even dreaming about like, what is the thing that you care about? Like, oh, you care about the climate? Like, oh boy, do I have something to tell you? If you wanna fix this climate, if you wanna fix this planet, you're gonna need approval voting.
Yeah.
Or like, if it's just like even in your own internal organization about like, if you want, like you said, a mandate to lead, if you hold some kind of election order, and it's like, it's about trying to find all the little things. I mean, that is one of the beautiful things about approval voting, is it is so simple that it makes it very adaptable. And so, finding where we can insert it in, but it's like, that means we also need to know what people care about, and we need to know what those things are that and how to fit it in, and how to create and craft that messaging, which is also why we need the diversity. We need the people who are involved in all sorts of different areas, and to get people who think about, who imagine a better world in whatever capacity it is, and showing why this very simple thing can help create that better world that they're looking for.
Yeah. I want to get a bumper sticker which says "Make politics boring."
Yeah, that is something I've said to people before. I was like, approval voting, actually, St. Louis and Fargo have approval voting. You didn't hear about them because it was uneventful, which is the way it should be.
Yeah, it just worked. When Tashara Jones won, everyone was like, yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, that's a big thing. So thank you again. I appreciate you coming on.
Pleasure.
So this is all free to share everywhere. There will be a permanent YouTube link. But tune in next week when we have Sarah Wolk from the Equal Vote Coalition on. I'm glad I was able to get my words out, because next week I really want to listen to her, because she has some really, really good things to say on this topic. I think it's gonna be really great. All right, thank you, Felix, and I'm gonna